Hello, my name is James Arroyo, and this is Chapter 1, Communication Competence in Groups. Group communication is something that we are going to be engaging for the rest of our lives. We are going to engage in it in academic settings with study groups, group presentations. We are going to be engaging in it in group in organizations, in businesses, and we are even going to be engaging with it in social settings. So, the value and what we can bring to these group communication situations, if we are able to contribute something valuable to these group communication situations, will enrich our lives in very meaningful ways. But we all, I'm sure, have a similar attitude to that of what some people said in your textbook, that it is just as good as eating tofu, or it is not very good at all. So, why is it that it is so common to experience group hate? Some reasons are because people feel that they have contributed more than others, and that other people are slacking and they're doing more work. Group work can be time consuming and often unproductive. And if it's taking up time and it's unproductive, what's the point? And even members' incompatibility. Sometimes we just don't mesh very well. But even if we experience this hate, it doesn't mean that we can avoid it, because the amounts of group work in organization is only increasing, especially with new technologies. So we have to find ways to overcome this and to avoid this group hate. So how do we do it? Through competent communication, communicating effectively and appropriately in a given context. This does not simply mean learning skills, it means understanding communication better so that we are able to know when things are going to work, when things aren't going to work, when we are able to salvage a situation, or when we are not able to salvage a situation, and overall be more strategic in our communication so that we are able to overall be more effective. So, what is it that we could potentially gain from groups? We have so much that we can gain from groups. Feelings of belonging and affection, social connection. You can find these in friend groups. Social support through difficult times. You can find this in uh, s- uh, self-help groups like AA or whatever. Social connection can even be attained, or sorry, satisfaction from solving challenging problems in organizational groups, enhancing knowledge through study groups, thrills and entertainment, through more friend groups, or even like social clubs, gaining sense of community through homeowners associations or whatever, acquiring an identity and achieving pleasure from helping others, and even finding creative outlets, all of which we can gain when our group affiliations are meaningful for us. Now that we know that we will experience group hate and that there are some benefits that can be gained through uh, through overcoming this group hate and still engaging with groups, we're now going to discuss some of the myths of what communication and define what communication is not. The first myth about communication is that communication is a cure-all. That no matter what the situation is, it can be solved with effective communication. That is simply not the case. A big reason for that not being the case is that you only have, at best, 50% of that interaction. You can have the most clear points and not be aggressive or defense provoking at all, and communicate as well as you can and the person can simply not listen. There are some things that cannot be solved through communication alone, but there are a ton of things that communication or effective communication can solve. Communication can break down. That is a second myth, but communication never breaks down. It is simply continuing. It is not that we are not communicating, it is that we are communicating things that we do not intend to communicate. If I am trying to talk to someone and they just walk out of the room, what is being communicated there? Even if they did not intend to communicate anything with me, they have communicated certain things just by walking out of the room, or by not talking at all, or by not giving any nonverbal expression like facial or gestures. The third myth is that effective communication is merely skill building. This is not the case because there are certain communication skills that we can develop. Things like humor, things like communicating your thoughts effectively, by empathy, listening. These are all effective skills, but we have to be able to understand when these things are applicable and when we should engage with these versus when we should flex other communication muscles and communication strategies. There are, for example, you would not try to seek empathy when you are handling an abuser or a bully. The fourth and last myth is that effective communication is just common sense. This is not the case at all. In fact, it is more reflective of the hindsight bias. That is, that if we, that the things that are in the past become common sense. If it were common sense, then miscommunication would not be as common as it is today. So let us define, now that we've defined what communication is not, now we're going to define what communication is. Communication is transactional, meaning that what I say affects you and what you say affects me. What I communicate affects you, what you communicate affects me. So there is a transaction of message. Even as I'm sending information to you, you are still sending information to me. It also has content and relational dimensions. If I say, hey, how are you doing? The content of that message is, hey, how are you doing? A question asking how you are doing. But if I say it in a very weird way, or maybe even if we do not know each other very well, maybe I'm just a stranger on a bus and I just try to start a conversation. Hey, how are you doing? At that point, the relational dimension of that message says that there is a relationship here. And then that communication is trying to set a relationship, and that may not be the particular relationship. Then communication is a process, and it's a continual process. Not just what we talk about in this one situation is going to, what we communicate about in this situation is going to affect others, other interactions that we have in the future. Not to mention that as I'm sending messages, you are also always sending messages back. And communication shares meaning. We share meaning through verbal communication and nonverbal communication. We start with verbal communication. Language is a structured system of symbols. These words are symbols. What's the difference between the word chair, light, dog, cat, and rose? Each of these words is entirely meaningless on their own. They are simply vibrations hitting air, and that is it. It is the meaning that we place onto it. It is the symbol that it stands for, or the symbol that we put onto this word. That is what gives it meaning. So when I say rose, you mean the flower. When I type cheddar or money or greatest of all time, that communicates a message. In the same way, actual symbols communicate a message. But meaning and usage of words depends on common agreement of what we agree this meaning is. For example, if you have what are some of the symbolic meanings you have for the word rose? Some of them may be love, or affection or romance. But someone could potentially have a different symbol for it. In fact, someone from a flower shop may see it as a means of income, or even what could happen as a little child, and I had done this back in the day, was I got a rose and I gave it to someone who I liked, because like a guy friend that I liked, because I was like, yo, this flower looks super cool. They, however, had a different symbolic meaning for it, and the friendship was stressed a little bit after that. Not too much, though. Meaning and usage of words depends on common agreement, and we strive to find this common agreement with the words that we say. Culture, however, complicates this. Some things are lost in translation. Look to this symbol right here. What is that symbol? Yes, you're right. In Buddhist belief, it is, I believe, freedom and peace. Not particularly what some people who are very familiar with World War II would see that symbol as. But there are other verbal messages. In fact, there have been many political leaders or people in general who have tried to communicate in a certain language and communicated something very differently in another language. I believe your textbook talked about how a Chinese proctorial hospital to like work on the prostate was called the Chinese anus hospital, and that was obviously something that was a little bit weird. Then we also linguistically indicate our identification with the group. What if someone my age said words like cheddar or goat or it's Gucci, it's lit or it's sick, snatched, I guess, TBH, thirsty, meaning like drinking water, V, or YOLO, or even one of my favorites, spilled the tea. Or spill the tea, please, meaning like share the information, share the rumor. Obviously, those may be a bit cringeworthy because I am not part of that group. And because I am using this language that is more for identification within a younger group, and since I'm not part of that group, then it comes off as weird. Now we move on to nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication captures a wide array of behaviors, from facial expressions, eye contact, personal appearance, tone of voice, gestures, posture, touch, use of space, and time. All of these are ways that we engage in communication through nonverbal communication. That being said, technology removes quite a bit of these nonverbal cues through text. What are some of the things that we lose? We lose tone of voice, which is another thing. We lose touch. We lose personal appearance, physical environment, the gestures that we use. We lose all of those nonverbal communication behaviors. What do we try to do to supplement those? Emojis. But obviously, those could be either ineffective or inappropriate in business communication. Also, nonverbal communication is often ambiguous. If someone, for example, touches another person's hand, should I automatically assume that they are a couple? Obviously not. In the same way, if someone is dressed, very, very like shabbily, and maybe like their hair is not done, things like that, am I automatically going to assume that this person is very disorganized? No, it could have been to a wide array of situational factors that could have been caused. So it is nonverbal communication is very ambiguous. What can sometimes focus that message is multiple nonverbal communication skills, because meaning is coordinated, but also the verbal communication that goes along with it. Sharing meaning nonverbally between cultures can also be problematic. For example, this could be fine in a lot of cultures, but it could also mean ASS whole in other cultures. Doing this to someone could be fine, like come here, or it could mean treating someone like a dog in other cultures. Even this, which is the symbol for peace in our culture, if flipped around this way, could mean "fu" in a more in a European culture. So they're shaping meaning across cultures, especially through nonverbal communication, can sometimes be challenging, especially for those nonverbal communication behaviors that have specific meanings. It can also greatly impact our perceptions of others. If you were conducting an interview and someone came in and an hour late, disheveled, sweating, stumbling over their words, hugging you and saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you were here." Would that person get the job even if they were incredibly qualified? Nope, probably not. In fact, Jordan Peterson, I believe, the person who killed his family, he Scott Peterson, sorry, Scott Peterson. Some of the reasons why they found him guilty was because he showed no remorse or no sadness for for the loss of his family. And in a channel discrepancy, that meaning if I'm saying I'm not sad verbally, but I'm crying, communicating that I'm sad non-verbally, what is believed more? The non-verbal communication, because it is less able to be controlled and therefore comes off as more genuine. So non-verbal communication is believed over verbal communication, and more meaning is actually created through nonverbal communication than through simply the words that we say. So, what does it mean? Now that we've talked about what communication is not and what communication is, now we're going to be talking about how to communicate well. In other words, how to be a competent communicator. There are three big parts: being effective, achieving our goals; appropriate, following the rules of common interactions; and being able to achieve in the face of intercultural challenges? Let's jump right in. We start with effectiveness, achieving our goals. Guess what? You have to be able to achieve your goals in communication. Otherwise, it's probably not very effective. Effectiveness is how well we have progressed towards the achievement of goals. This is sometimes a matter of degree, though, that we may not want be 100% perfect in all speeches at all times. There are some situations where we are incredibly proficient. There are some situations that we are probably not as proficient. And there are some situations where we may be very deficient. Think to a job interview. You may be incredibly proficient in this situation. However, maybe in a conflict situation, you may not be as proficient, or a family situation, or a romantic situation. Not just situation, but also understanding that we are always on a learning curve, that we always have areas of improvement in every communication situation. So we can improve. A big part of effective communication is having a we orientation and not just a me orientation by holding the group above the individual. This does a lot of things. One of the biggest is it automatically shows a regard for the other people. It says, you know what? I am not the only person in this group. I want us all to come up with a solution. And by allowing this shared space where we can all get exactly what we want, that allows for effective communication, because if it is competitive, it is about me, not about the other people. It's about me being the leader. It's about me getting an A. It's about me not having to do all of the work, or not having to do the lion's share of the work. What does that do? That automatically puts people on the defensive, because it's saying, oh, are you saying that I shouldn't get an A? Are you saying that I am not going to put in all the work? Or are you saying that I do not have the ability to input into this group? At that point, people can either get very aggressive towards you or retreat. In other words, either fight or flight. And at that point, it is hard to become logical. It is hard to try to trust and hard to try to engage in communication. At that point, we may just be acting on instinct. We also have to keep in mind the appropriateness of the situation, or follow the rules of social interaction. Appropriateness is complying to the contextual cues and their accompanying expectations. What are some of the contextual cues that this person is not obeying? Oh, okay, I'll answer. He is smiling even though it is a sad situation. So obviously the context, the situation is, it is not appropriate. But that can also go for relational context. If, let's say, someone is going out on a first date and decides to try to hold the other person's hand or give the other person a hug, even though the relationship has not developed to that point, then that would not be appropriate. In the same way, there are also cultural expectations. And this is where, or cultural rules, and this is where, if there are differing cultural rules, then there can be some challenges. For example, if I were to, one time actually, I am not the most religious person, but I was okay with other people's beliefs. And one friend that I had, when they were about to eat, they were about to say grace, and I was already starting to eat. Then they were like, James, you know what, we're going to do this. And I had to learn from that situation. So I was not acting appropriately given their cultural rules. In the same way, another cultural rule could be taking off your shoes as you enter a home. Obviously, those rules may be ingrained. And one that we may not know, if if from some Asian cultures, I believe especially in Japan, if someone hands you their business card and you put it in your pocket, that is seen as or automatically into your pocket, it will be seen as a sign of disrespect for not respecting that you are giving that they have gotten their business that you have gotten their business card. So, appropriateness is governed by rules. You should not hug people you do not know. You should not smile at funerals. You should not put a card into your pocket without first acknowledging and appreciating that they have given you their card. These can have very consequential effects, from just a poor impression, keeping in mind that first impressions may sometimes be hard to shake, but also could even lead to social ostracism or even to no further interactions with that person. However, rules are not sacrosanct, meaning that rules can constantly change. There are some rules that are ingrained within our class as it stands now that we hope to change. There may be some rules in your group, in your friend relationships. There may be some people who can say certain things and some people who can't. And it is up to us, and it is possible that we are able to change some of these appropriateness rules. Then we have intercultural challenges. This involves individualism and collectivism. These are two of the biggest worldview differences across cultures. Individualism is one of the ones that we are most adapted to. Frankly, we are ranked as like the most individualistic culture, whereas other cultures may be seen as more collectivistic. So, in individualistic cultures, we value autonomy, are defined by independence. My right, your right, these are my rights. You have no rights in this situation. Self, competition. Geez, we have wars about cupcakes. And even privacy. In fact, one of my friends in our individualistic culture was, as a punishment, because he was like kind of a bad child, he had his door taken off of the hinges and put into the garage. He lost his privacy as a punishment. Whereas in collectivistic cultures, values the commitment to the group. It's defined by cooperation, loyalty, responsibility, community, and maintaining harmony. And think of this like an iceberg. At the very bottom of the iceberg, under the water, are these individualistic and collectivistic worldviews, our values, our beliefs. But the things that we see on top of that are things like either high context communication, communication that's very much relying on high context, more polite communication, more indirect communication in collectivistic cultures, because they value group harmony and community and cooperation. And if they were to be blunt, that could put that harmony at risk. Whereas our culture may value more bluntness. Say what you mean and get on with it. Don't beat around the bush. Time is money. Let's go. That may be seen as too blunt, too rude from the other side, whereas someone from the collectivistic side, communication from the collectivistic side as seen through the individualistic lens may see it as, geez, just say what you mean. So there are challenges here, but that does not say that these challenges are not able to be overcome, and that there are not great benefits that can be gained due to overcoming these challenges, which there are a great deal. So we first start with how can we improve communication with intercultural groups. First, we should always try to embrace diversity, to understand that people are different from us and to embrace those differences instead of having an ethnocentric mindset. The ethnocentric mindset is that my values, beliefs, and behaviors are right, and every other value, belief, and behavior is wrong or different or somehow deficient. This can lead to a great deal of problems, especially the fact that our world is getting more and more intercultural, not just because we are in America, where we are a land of immigrants, where we see a wide diversity of people, not just at our campus, but also around us all day. But also with the advent of technology, where we are able to communicate with people across the globe, and with globalization, with our organizations spanning across multiple continents. So it is valuable to embrace this diversity. We also should strive to reduce uncertainty. When we are uncertain, we get anxious. That is the human way. When we are uncertain about a certain situation, we get anxious. And there are two options. The bad option, or the option that we should try to avoid, is that we avoid the situation entirely. We do not feel anxious because we are not interacting. We do not feel uncertain about how this interaction will go, or or uncertain about who this person is, because we are not interacting with this person. That is neither effective or appropriate in a lot of situations. If someone who is diverse from you is in the same group as you are, guess what? Just not communicating with them is not an option. So we have to reduce uncertainty. This is by asking questions, interacting, reducing uncertainty about some of the things that maybe you do not understand about the person in a respectful way, obviously, or how they are communicating. To better understand means you will be better able to predict future interactions and therefore not just be more successful in those interactions, but also feel more confident in those interactions and therefore be more likely to engage in future interactions with people of diverse intercultural perspectives. Also, another way to improve our communication is through listening and learning. We have never no one has ever offended someone by listening to them. In fact, listening is one of those things that a lot of people can improve on quite a bit. So, by simply listening, we can learn from people. Also, don't stereotype certain groups. Stereotyping is putting people in a box and is reflective of ethnocentrism, and can diminish our intercultural competency and our group competency as well. So instead of putting people in a box, instead of stereotyping, treat every person like their own individual, that they are not part of a group, they are a person, and I am trying to communicate with another person. And try to employ the platinum rule, where the golden rule is treat others how you would like to be treated. Employing the platinum rule means treating others how they would like to be treated. This means that if someone would like to be called they, no skin off my back, call them they. If they want to be, you know, uh, greeted in a certain way, try to greet them in that way. If they are want you to take off your shoes as you come into their house, accommodate and take off your shoes as you enter their house. We want to try to improve our intercultural competency because we have a great deal to learn from these situations, and by being able to build relationships with those who are of intercultural who come from an interculturally diverse worldview is a highly valuable skill, not just in relationships, but also in business and organizations. And learn to style shift. This means with people from more collectivistic worldviews, you may want to use more high context, being more polite, trying to, for lack of a better word, beat around the bush, not really be as direct. Whereas in a more individualistic context, being straight to the point or low context, that is far more effective in that situation. And now for achieving communication competence. How do we get better at it? First, knowledge. By learning the rules, not just the appropriateness rules, but the other rules. How is it that people communicate? What are some of the emotional things that are going on? How do groups actually work? Why is it that one person can do so much, and how do I avoid that? By understanding communication better, it will allow us to navigate our social reality better so that those situations that seemed inevitable end up becoming manageable. Next, focusing on skills, showing this communication competence, not just knowing it, applying these skills. We're going to be talking about a wide array of ways to avoid challenges and to address issues in productive ways that will eventually improve the group culture. We may know them, but unless we apply them, they are not worth a whole lot. Next, sensitivity. Being receptive accuracy. By taking in information and actually understanding and trying to really be receptive to some of this feedback that you're getting from others is the only way to improve our communication skills and our communication knowledge. Not just this, but also have a commitment to these ideals. This is one of those things where when we have that inevitable failure, we are going to fail in some groups. Some groups will be irredeemable, but there will be some times when they could have been redeemed, but we didn't do what we should have done. That is okay. It is okay to make mistakes. But we have to be sure that we are committed, that when we do make these mistakes, we push further and we are still committed towards excellence, and we will eventually reach the mountaintop of success. And also be ethical. There's the right and the wrong of communication. Yes, this is adapted through your cultural lens, but we have to be sure that we are being ethical in what we do in regards to communication, treating others how they would like to be treated, but also, I guess, how you would like to be treated as well, is one of the golden rules of ethics. Okay, we move on from communication now to how to define a group. A group is a human communication system composed of 3 or more individuals interacting for the achievement of some common goal, who influence and are influenced by each other. Let's break down that definition a little bit. First, it is a communication system, meaning that every action can have a ripple effect. The size can affect things. That this system is very intricate, and what happens all the way on this side of the system can affect things all the way on this side of the system. The next part is that it's composed of 3 or more individuals. The reason why one or one or two is not group communication is because in dyadic communication, aka between two people, interpersonal communication, there is this relationship and this relationship. But in group communication, with even one more person added, it is not just, hold on, here, I'm going to do this. It's not just this person and this person's relationship, but also this person and this person's relationship, these two and this person's relationship, these two and this person's relationship, and all of those intricacies surrounding all of that. So groups are very different. And also, the next part of this is interacting for the achievement of some common goal. It is goal oriented. We hope to achieve something in this group. Support groups hope for self-improvement. Study groups hope for improving of knowledge. Group projects focus on achieving a good grade or providing the best project possible. Problem-solving groups search for a certain help try to analyze a problem and then find solutions to that problem. All of these are certain goals that everyone in the group is hoping to achieve. And the last part is who influence and are influenced by each other. This again talks to the system portion of this, but that what I do affects other people and what other people do affects me. For example, in a support group, if I am talking so much and I'm, calling people out, I am affecting them as well as the whole group's effectiveness in self-improvement. In the same way, if I was in a group project and I were to do all of the work to try to push other people out of the situation entirely, that would affect other people's interactions with each other as well. That's one that very rarely happens. In fact, it's quite the opposite, but I will leave it at that. Then we also have to keep in mind the distinctions between small groups, which we will be talking about mostly, and large groups. It is a little bit hard to define the difference between these two, though, where a small group is 7 people, 8 people, is that still a small group? 9, 10, 15, 30? It's kind of hard to define. Some of the things that we do use to define it are that if you cannot remember every person in the group, that if whether or not everyone was there, then it is not a small group, it is a large group. But a group is not a simple aggregation. A simple aggregation would be people standing in line. There is no goal. They do not have influence on each other. Versus where a support group or a homeowners association or a friend group, they do definitely have certain goals, social goals of support and of, having fun. And when those goals aren't met, the relationship dissolves, or the group dissolves. But there are certain goals, they have influence on each other, and they are 3 or more. Next, we move on to interpersonal communication and public speaking, aka ungroups, things that are not groups. There is an important qualitative dimension in regards to a small group. A group dynamic seems to begin with no fewer than 3 individuals, because if there's only 2 people communicating, it's just our interaction and nothing really else. Versus 3 people, that is where some other communication theories come into play. Not to mention, we have to then find ways to cohabitate and try to coexist. And we also have to understand how all of our relationships play in together. Just think about how you interact with a small group of friends and what happens when one other person is added to that group of friends. It can change the dynamic quite a bit. And then public speaking. This isn't group communication as well, because it has 3 dimensions. It has a speaker, it has an audience, and it has a situation. And all of the rest of the stuff doesn't really play in. There is no ability for instantaneous response from an audience to the speaker. So, therefore, one side can affect quite a bit, the other side cannot affect, the audience cannot really affect the speaker that much. So that concludes chapter 1. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.